When I ask UX people who practice user research what is their biggest challenge, I usually hear how hard it is to engage stakeholders with research. What are your thoughts on this topic?
Do you mean, when you say engage, do you mean it's hard to get them to let you do research, or it's hard to get them to make a connection to the research that has been done?
Um, I think both.
Okay.
It's both about selling research to begin with, and
Mm.
also by engagement. I also refer to having them actually do something with the research
Yeah.
results that they're
Yeah.
getting.
So I'll answer that in two parts because they're sort of the two issues. Um, one of the lucky things about the clients I work with and the way I work is that I work for myself. I'm mostly in a position where I can choose the work that I take on.
Hmm.
So if I'm hearing initially from a client that they just want me to come in, do the work, do some sort of magic and make it awesome without, particularly on something that I may not know very well, and without talking to people, if I get a feeling for that initially, I might just not take on that work.
Hmm.
And more often work with people who I know are more inclined to actually think about the people that they're designing for. So sometimes that problem just goes away. So I've noticed that there's sort of three different types of clients. Or projects. One is clients who just assume that we're going to do stuff with users, and they know enough about either user research or usability testing or user experience, read about it, heard about it,
Hmm.
and just sort of know that's the way you do things. And they take it for granted that, of course, we're going to do that. It's
Hmm.
just a piece of it, and that's really cool. Another type that I can do is do a bit of in-house work with clients where I might work with them for a long time. And I've got this great client right now who I'm like that. And it's a small organisation, and it's like only 150 people,
Hmm.
and the users are just there. So I don't even mention it. I don't mention user research. I don't talk about it. I don't use any jargon. I just go talk to the folks. I just go hang out with them. If I have a question, I can just go ask them. So that one's nice. And that then makes it easy as well. And then the third type is clients who, for budget reasons or time reasons or, all the myriad of reasons why they don't want to actually go and do research, they won't do it. And I'm working with one at the moment who's like that. I couldn't convince them on the value of going out and doing it. They had some market research already. And it's something that between the team, we know the domain fairly well, and they've got a pretty good handle on their customers. And it's something that I can understand because it's something I've been through myself, and I can't say what it is. So I just keep warning them that we're doing our best, but we still may miss the mark because we haven't done that research and we may not know people. And they're all right with that. It's a low-risk project, so they're fine with not going and doing the research, and they're fine with getting something done, getting it out there, and then seeing what happens, and building it up on the feedback that they get as well. And so as long as they know that there's a risk, I'm comfy working with them.
Okay, so
Excuse me.
that leads me to you pretty much answered my next question, but
Oh, okay.
I want you to maybe elaborate a little bit about that. So
Mhm.
I'm hearing from you just said it, and I'm hearing from other UX practitioners who work in either agencies or self-employed ones that research is usually the first thing to make it out of a project after a client sees a project proposal.
Yeah.
So can you talk more about how you position research to your clients or stakeholders to prevent this from happening?
Well, I think part of it is understanding the client well enough and understanding what might need doing well enough to set the scope of that research well at the beginning.
Hmm.
If you've got, I say, a $60,000 project and $30,000 of that's research, the client is quite likely to go, what? but because that might, and like I'm just making up numbers, but it might just completely look like overkill. But if you can scope it well, then it's a little less likely to happen. And one of the things that I often will do that can really work for them is say, okay, what I'm going to do is first we're going to analyse all the things we already know. So we're going to look at web analytics and customer emails and talk to sales staff or call centre staff or search terms, whatever sort of analytics they have running, figure out all of the things that we can find out about users already. Because I'm usually working on products for existing sites or products, not usually brand new things that are never been done before. So we've usually got something to start with, and that's a good start. It doesn't cost very much. It doesn't take very much time to do that. And the way I usually sell that to them is, we'll do this, it won't take us a lot of time, and then we'll know what we don't know, and we'll know whether to go out further and do, a little survey, or to phone up a half a dozen people and have a chat to them, or whether we actually have a really big gap and we need to do a bigger piece of research. So that usually works as well, and it works well from a project sense because I get to do enough work to see how big the research piece needs to be. So that's a good use of time and money in a project. And then if they still don't want to do it, well, actually there's two things. One, like I said before, they're the client. They get to take that risk. That's what their decision is all about. But then the other time, sometimes I will just say to them, okay, we are making this up. I will make mistakes. I don't know what those mistakes will be, but I will make mistakes. You will make mistakes. We'll all make mistakes. We will miss the mark somewhere. And again, they have to take that risk. As long as I've communicated to them what the risks are and the benefits of doing some research, then it is their choice as the client and the person who's spending money to choose how much of that risk to take.
All right. Imagine an in-house UX researcher who's always trying to identify opportunities for impactful research. What would you recommend they do to better identify such opportunities?
I think in-house people just have something amazing that many don't take enough advantage of, and that is, like I just said with talking about analysing the existing data, they have real stuff happening. They have real people emailing in questions. They have real people using the site or the application or whatever. They've got stuff happening all the time. Every single time somebody asks a question, it's an opportunity to either just listen to the question that they've asked, or to follow up that question and find out a little bit about what maybe they were trying to achieve that they couldn't, or what is the sort of underlying need. I do this a bit with, I run a conference, and I do this a bit with my conference. Every single time somebody asks me a question, often I'll just go, oh, I've written that. How is that not clear? But I'm enough of a researcher that I go, okay, there's something in that. I either get back to them and find out what didn't work, or I go, okay, I'm missing a piece of copy. So I can do that completely ongoing research and improvement process as I go. And in-house people should be able to do it all the time, keeping on top of their analytics monthly or how often, or really keeping in touch with all those people who are out talking to customers. God, I'd love to be in an in-house job where I could do that and just really keep on top of it. It's much easier than big research projects.
Okay. UX researchers sometimes experience a tension between conducting research they were asked to do by their stakeholders, for example, a product manager maybe, versus research they were not asked to do but think they should do. What are your thoughts on balancing this tension?
I can't think of a situation where that's happened. One of the things that one of the things that occurs to me, like when I'm doing research, whether it's something that I've been asked to go find out or something that I've, triggered that I need to find out, is when you have an opportunity to spend time with people, whether it's on the phone or face-to-face or whatever, there's always opportunities to stretch it and to learn a little bit more. So even if I'm just doing a usability test towards the end of some sort of project, I can still learn a little bit more about the underlying needs. So I'm not quite sure how to answer it, maybe because either because it hasn't come up and I haven't had to go, oh, how do I deal with this? Or it's just something I do.
Mm-hmm. So have you ever been in a situation where somebody tells you, a client tells you, we want you to do X, and you think they need to do Y?
No.
All right.
And maybe that's because I work closely enough with the clients that we don't get in a situation where they tell me to do something that I don't expect.
All right.
Hmm.
Okay. Can you tell me a story about a difficult stakeholder who did not understand or respect UX research? And you don't have to name names.
Oh no, I've never named names. That would be terrible. I have worked for a department, the government department, won't name names, and some of the project managers in there really. I think the design team hadn't really sold their services well and hadn't really communicated very well what they did. Mm-hmm. So the project managers mostly expected that we were just going to draw screens, and that because we were so awesome, because that's how the management had sold us, we were so awesome that there was no. Why would we need to go and talk to people? Well, like, they're hiring us to do the work. They're hiring us to know how to design screens. And why would we possibly need to go and talk to, humans about that? Because, no, just get on with your work and design screens. Mm-hmm. It was not particularly fun working with folks like that. And again, that's where I just go, well, sometimes I just don't know things. I don't know everything. I've been doing it for a long time and I'm pretty good at designing screens or designing the application or designing the workflow or whatever it is, but I don't know everything about everybody. And certainly, the situation where we were in that time where it was a department full of staff whose role I didn't know what they did day to day. I couldn't imagine what they would be doing day to day and the questions they were being asked. I still didn't get out and talk to people. And I left that client soon after as well. I didn't stick around very long. It was a frustrating. No, every recruiter in Canberra knows not to ask me about that one.
All right. Many UX practitioners are always looking for creative deliverables that engage their stakeholders with research findings. What are some deliverables that you found to be working well for you?
My very, very favourite way, if I'm in any sort of situation where I can be face-to-face with a client, so this doesn't hold for a situation where I need to just send something off and can't and don't get to sit with them, is I prepare my deliverable, maybe wireframes, annotated, documentation, scenarios, all of that stuff. I prepare that as background. And then the way I present it to them is not give them that. I don't give them that at the beginning. I get my whiteboard marker and a whiteboard and I walk through a story. So I'll usually tell them what we did first about figuring out what the scope of the problem was. And I'll write that down on the board as I go. And then I'll tell them about the main things we learned about the users. And then I'll tell them the main things that we learned about the content or the application or the workflow or the content side of it. And I'll be writing these things down on the whiteboard. So I've actually rehearsed it. I know what I'm going to say and how I'm going to draw it up. But I tell it as a narrative. And I tell them the challenges, and I will also tell them the issues that came up and why we decided to go in a particular direction, and usually the issues that came up and why we decided not to go in a particular direction, because those questions will always come up as well. So I'm writing this stuff on the whiteboard, and filling ideas out and filling their heads with it. And I've never once not seen somebody engaged in this. They're always totally engaged in the story. There's nobody like sitting back like making notes or playing with their email. They're engaged with the story. They're engaged with me telling it. And then, there's always documentation that needs to be to follow up, whether it's detailed wireframes or detailed business requirements or whatever. So that's all done, and that's sitting there ready for them. But I don't go through that because it's boring, and it's just detail. I tell them the stories, and I tell them where to find the information, and it just works. It's such a good approach. I just love doing it.
So I'm interested in the reasons you're doing that. Many of us are writing reports, sending them away, maybe give a presentation, maybe not. How did you come to do this?
Well, the reason I do it is because I know people love stories. And I also know that if I present findings without presenting or talking about the path that I took and the thinking that went into those findings, then I'm going to present the findings and they're going to ask me a bunch of questions that are really about why did you do that and why did you do this and why did you decide to go that way and why didn't you put this thing over there? So if I can anticipate the types of things they're going to ask and weave them into that story, what then happens is they ask really good questions. So it might be like edge cases, or they'll go, oh wow, we could do such and such. So like that, just that narrative works really well.
All right. Last question. How can UX practitioners tell if their stakeholders are bought into research?
They'll. The two main clients I'm working with right now, one, we've done a set of personas and scenarios to drive our content and functionality and things for this particular project. But I'm working with an agency who've never done this work, and then we've got the client. And just like I said with that last example, the way I can tell that they're engaged because we're all talking about the personas by name, and when we talk through it with the client, they're just like, oh yeah, I know somebody like that, and they do this and this, and that would really help them. And they understand it. They know where we're coming from. It's not a mystery, and we're all on board at once. So they're just engaged. Excuse me. The other client I'm working on, I know they're engaged with it because the senior managers keep popping by my desk to see how we're going, and like, how's that project going? How are you coming? And giving me other people to talk to, and they're just really keen, and they're keen because they can see that their organisation is engaged in it. They're enthusiastic.
Okay, that's great. That's all I have for you. Thank you very much for your time.
Great, thank you.